P-H-Y, 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 P-H-Y. Physics. Welcome!
Welcome to another AP Physics Camp. Today we're going to be reviewing, Alex! You need to review all lab safety rules, Alex, which is a good thing because that's exactly what today's video is going to be about. And we're also going to be reviewing a couple of essential math skills that you're going to need in physics. Okay, so enough playing around with the lab equipment and let's get started. Okay, so let's first start with some basic rules that apply in any science lab, which is no food or drinks, Alex. Yes, that means your bottled drink and chips bag. Wait, Alex, watch out. Whoa, that looked like it really hurt. And all of this could have been avoided if you didn't have any drinks or food in the lab. Furthermore, if you were wearing the proper lab attire, such as no open-toed shoes, no loose clothes, no shorts, nor untied long hair, and not to mention the improper use of lab equipment to make that unstable tower of books. Yes, Alex, that's right. Hair could get caught up in our physics equipment, and that definitely would not be pretty. So keep your rock star wig at home, please. You don't really need to come in full body armor. Simply stick to wearing proper lab attire. That's right, we can't forget safety goggles. And as for gloves and lab aprons, we don't really work with chemicals, but it's important to know where these are located if the lab experiment requires it. Alex, are you eating in the lab? See, I told you. Now you have spicy residue from the chips all over your eyes. Well, good thing you remembered where the eye wash station was and how to use it. But if you would have followed the no food in the lab rule, this could have been avoided. Also, when you're in the lab, you should always try to avoid touching your face and make sure that you wash your hands when you leave. You never know what residue can stay in your hands from the lab equipment or batteries, so it's a good rule to follow. And since you brought up the eye wash station, it's also good to know where the safety shower, emergency exits, fire extinguisher, and the fire blanket are located in your science classroom. Yes, Alex, it is good to know how to use the fire extinguisher as well by just remembering the acronym PASS, which means pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. Of course, we hope that you never have to use it, but you never know. There may be an unexpected emergency that arises, and it would be good to be prepared. Not so fast, Alex. You must first go over the entire safety contract that applies to all science labs, whether you're using chemicals or not. So make sure that you read the safety contract and sign that you are aware of all safety regulations that you must follow. Sure, maybe then you can be safety approved to start some lab experiments. Alex, not that kind of experiments. How about we go over an example of the type of experiments that you may see and the math skills that you're going to need in physics? For example, in physics, you may be tasked with the challenge of designing an experiment to determine the relationship between the mass added to a spring and the length the spring is extended. So what should we do first? You must first write out your hypothesis, which is where you're going to illustrate what relationship, if any, that you think these two variables may have. Great job, Alex. A good way to write out your hypothesis is by using an if and then statement in which you state that if you add more mass to the spring, then the spring will extend more. Okay, now we write out our materials and procedures. Generally, procedures should be about 10 detailed steps with the experimental variable modified at least 5 times and tested 3 times, which is known as the 5x3 rule. Awesome sketch, Alex. So the first thing would be for us to set up our lab the way that you have sketched it out. Then we will continue our procedure by measuring the length of the spring extension using a meter stick when we add the first set of weights, which would be 50 grams. Now, once we've added these, we have to remove the weight and record it once again. We will do this for a total of 3 trials. Now, at this point, we will be recording our data in our data table and make sure that the column is labeled appropriately with its units. Next, we will add 100 grams and record a total of 3 trials.
Repeat the steps for the varying weights of 150, 200, and 250.
Good question, Alex. Now that we have collected data, now what? Well, this is where you would need to determine which variable is dependent and which is independent so that you can make your graph. Based on your hypothesis, you felt that the length that the spring would extend was going to depend on how much mass you added. Therefore, our dependent variable would be the spring extension length and the independent would be the added mass. Now comes the tricky part, which goes on the x and which goes on the y-axis. Very good, Alex. If you remember dry mix, you will make your graphing life much easier. Dry means dependent on y-axis, which means we should write length here, and don't forget the units, which were centimeters. Then mix is the manipulated variable, also known as the independent, and that is placed on the x-axis, which means we should write mass here. And again, don't forget the units, which are grams. Okay, now what else are we missing? Great job, Alex. We're missing the title, which can easily be remembered as Y versus X. So in our case, we would write spring extension length versus mass. Now we plot our data on the graph by X and Y pairs. Great job, Alex. So what do you think is next? Not so fast, Alex. You still haven't gotten that A because you're missing the most important part of the lab, which is to analyze and interpret the data and then develop a conclusion. So first, let's start by looking at our graph. What do you notice about it? Very good, Alex. You notice a positive correlation in which most of the data points are grouped together in an ascending order. Okay, so what should we do next? No, Alex, we do not connect the dots. Since you noticed that there was a positive correlation, we actually need to try to find the line that best fits, also known as the trend line. Basically, we just need to draw a straight line across as many points as possible. So it's okay if the line doesn't cover all the points, as long as it covers as many as possible. Now that we have our trend line, we can select 2 points in that line that we can use to find the slope of the line. You're right, Alex. The points you select do not have to be the same data points that you collected. It could be any points on the trend line. Okay, so now that you have selected these, let's try calculating our slope. Do you happen to remember how to do that? Yes, Alex, this is something that you covered in math class. Glad that you remembered. Now, the slope of a straight line can be calculated by subtracting y2 minus y1, then dividing it by x2 minus x1. And in this case, we get 0.14 when we use these two selected points. Okay, now if we wanted to predict further y or x values, we would input the slope, which is m, into the slope-intercept formula known as y equals mx plus b, in which b is the y-intercept. Yes, Alex, that's right. The y-intercept is the value in which the trend line intercepts the y-axis. In this case, that is approximately 45 centimeters. That's right, Alex. We could use this formula to predict the mass added based on a certain spring extension length or vice versa. For example, let's say that we were asked to determine the mass added to the spring if the length of the extended spring was 86 centimeters. Yes, that's right. We would have to rearrange the equation to solve for x, which is the mass added. Great job, Alex. The equation will now read x equals y minus b divided by m. And now we would just need to input the known values such as 86 centimeters minus 45 centimeters divided by 0.14, which would equal 293 grams. Good question, Alex. We said that the y-intercept is the value in which the trend line intercepts the y-axis. In other words, zero mass. Yes, Alex, that's right. This would be the value of the spring unextended without any mass. In other words, the initial length of the spring. But how accurate and precise do you think our data was, Alex? Yes, Alex, accurate means how close to the right answer we were, and precise means how similar our data was within the trials. Yes, Alex, our data was pretty precise because it does not vary much between the trials. However, how could we determine if our data was accurate? Great idea, Alex. We could measure the initial length of the spring, also known as the actual value, and then compare it to the theoretical value, which was our calculated value. This is exactly what the percent error equation is for, to tell us how accurate our results were. So let's try it out. 48 centimeters minus 45 centimeters divided by 45 and then multiplied by 100, well, that gives us 7% error, which is not that high, but in our class, we're going to be using 5% or less as an acceptable percent value. Thus, ours was above it, which means that the data in this experiment wouldn't be considered as accurate as another with 5% or less. Okay, last thing is our conclusion. That's right, based on the positive correlation that we see in our graph, we could say that our hypothesis was correct. The more mass that was added, the more the spring extended in length. Furthermore, we could also illustrate that our experiment could require additional testing to verify those results due to high percentage error that could have been attributed to human error when collecting data or graphing. Additional testing could be improved by increasing the number of trials or using a graphing calculator to determine the line that best fits. This concludes our video lecture. Make sure that you read your safety contract carefully. And, well, that's it. Have a great one.